This is the Lee & Strimer Plus, and I've got to say, it's making me feel some kind of way. Stay with me. Thermal Grizzly's Carbonite pads offer peace of mind, ease of installation, and industry-standard performance in a market crowded with mediocre thermal compounds. Our own testing confirms they conduct heat appropriately and form a sufficient bond with the die or IHS and cooler. They're much cleaner than paste solutions and can be reused as many times as you'd like. They're also extremely consistent, that's my favorite part, which is why we use them for CPU cooler testing. Check them out via the link below. I remember about 7-8 years ago, one of my first gaming and editing PC builds had I don't think it had any RGB in it actually. I think the case itself had maybe like a red fan, but that was it. And I remember that I didn't really care too much about being able to customize the RGB, with the exception of maybe just trying to illuminate the parts inside. I wanted people to see the components, kind of like lighting up an engine bay, even though that's not really a good analogy, but you know what I mean. You want people to see your work. And that's kind of where the LED thing came from. But then it kind of evolved into this rainbow puke madness that doesn't admittedly cost too much more for manufacturers to implement at this point. Even DRGB or ARGB, which we have a video talking about, is not super expensive. You're not paying much more for it, although there is a certain premium to be had. It's just, when you see companies promoting a product and hyping it up only because it has RGB in it. I mean, did you ever think, I see the custom cable market as a market for enthusiasts, people with pretty deep pockets who want to make their builds look unique. But this just takes things to an entirely different level. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I honestly I kind of want to ask manufacturers to stop. Please stop. Because it's getting a bit out of hand. And I don't know anybody who, well, I don't personally know anybody who's gonna go crazy for it, but I'm sure there are people out there who will. That's kind of the problem, is the manufacturers are gonna feed the consumers what they want, and if a majority of you want RGB products like this, then they're gonna make RGB products like this. Now the Strimer Plus is definitely unique, and I like it in a lot of ways. RGB disgust aside, I think it's innovative in the way that they allow these RGBs to kind of differentiate themselves from other things on the market. So I'm gonna cycle through some of the modes here, and just gonna show you how crazy some of these can be. We showcased a bit of this at CES 2020, and I have the color set to white now, but you can change these to, you see we got a crazy rainbow effect going on there. You can control the speed, you can make it go pretty slow, although I prefer the faster speeds because it just looks more fluid this way. It looks like it's operating at a higher refresh rate, if you will. But there's plenty of stuff you can do with this kind of kit, and that's kind of the selling point. Check this one out. It looks like music waveforms, yeah? You can make it slower if you want. Again, I prefer the faster ones. I think it looks better this way. And then you can change the colors. You can also change the brightness, make it pretty dark if it's blinding you while you're playing your video games. Just to give you a few examples. I mean, I could go on. Like, there are so many different presets in here. I'm not sure, like, you're gonna get a freaking stroke looking at this one, but you get the point. Like, it's over the top, and that's what Lee & wanted. Look, Lee & makes awesome products. The Landcool 2, in my opinion, was one of the best cases ever made, especially at its price point. But I'm reluctant to put this in a build, not because I don't think it's innovative, but because I'm just tired of seeing stuff like this. Like, we had the original Strimer and that was cool, but now we're just getting more and more revisions of essentially the same idea. RGBifying everything, and I just can't. Another thing I've really grown to hate about RGB products is the fact that they just add so much more clutter to your build. Look at this, for example. You've got to have this controller, okay, hooked up directly to the Strimer, and then you've got to have, depending on how you want to sync this to your system, either one of 3 cables hooked up to either a SATA port here on your power supply, or they have basically an ARGB connection in the middle, or a male. So one of these is male, one of these is female. Anyway, it gets kind of confusing. I don't even know what this one's for. I actually have no clue. But you got to put this somewhere, and then if you ever want to change the effect, you have to open up your case, get to this, and then toggle it. So make sure you put this somewhere accessible in the back of your system, preferably. It is roughly the size of a 2.5-inch drive, a little smaller than that, so maybe you could put it in like a 2.5-inch drive bay if you have one of those. But yeah, the clutter. I mean, in a system that is already pretty jam-packed, most of mine are because I like to use custom cables, not RGB ones, mind you. This is just gonna make things near impossible to manage. Another thing I don't necessarily like about this particular product is the fact that it is very bulky. It's bulky because, well, it has to be. So the cables themselves, you can see there are 2 layers of them, 24 in total, are underneath the RGB panel, if you will. So you can actually detach this, and you can do so by kind of sliding this bottom bracket out and then pulling this apart, and there you go. So really, it's just a set of kind of silverish white cables with RGB rubberized, I don't know what you want to call these, strips above them. It's a cool idea, but again, it makes things bulkier, and in cases that are pretty restrictive from like a 24-pin perspective, like my S340 Elite, it's going to be difficult to get these to bend as tight as you want them because, again, it's just such a thick cable set overall. It would be really cool if they could figure out how to actually like RGBify the cables themselves. Instead, we have to put stuff over the cables, and I think that's what adds to the clutter and ultimately dissuades me from fully recommending a product like this. Now, another issue with the Strimer Plus being so thick, especially on this side of the product, is you're gonna have to figure out how to manage this behind your motherboard tray. Typically with 24-pin cables, if they're just extensions, you wanna kind of bunch these up behind the motherboard itself. That tends to be where a lot of free space is. It's gonna be difficult to route this with other things because it's so bulky here, whereas normally if you're just using a standard 24-pin from the power supply, you don't have this clutter here. So now you have a double whammy, and you can see that's pretty beefy there. That's at least, almost 2 centimeters, if not a bit more than that. And you can't turn it sideways because I don't know many cases that are that thick behind the motherboard tray. So you're gonna have to run it flat, and that's presumably gonna be on top of the other cables that are running down the side of your system. So yeah, you can see I struggle with it quite a bit. I hope you figure out a better way to route these because I could not manage these in my S340 Elite. And another thing, to add insult to injury, you've got to somehow manage these cables. You got to push them up into these little combs here. There's 2 sets of combs. There's one for the bottom half of this bracket, and then you have to route some cables into the top half that actually holds the LEDs in place. You have to do all of this before you can actually secure the LED strips, I guess I want to call them that, to the 24-pin. And you can see it ain't easy because you gotta fiddle with the, I mean, you've got this guy, I don't know, I just, if you have to move this thing, it's gonna suck. Nate's really trying to show you guys, and I apologize about the kind of sham angle here, but yeah, once you've got something like that, then you gotta slide this thing in, and just don't know if we're gonna be able to do that all in one shot without taking so much of your precious time away. Yep, I think maybe we got it. Okay, yeah, so there we go. And then this little clear bracket here kind of manages those. Push this a bit more forward. There we go. And now you can torque it pretty hard. You see you're still gonna have some dead space here below, near where the 24-pin connects to the motherboard, but you're probably not gonna see this, especially from straight on. It'll look more like this from your orientation. So again, gonna look a bit bulky, but if you can manage it, and again, you're into RGB, this will look pretty sweet. It's gonna look very unique. It's gonna definitely draw the attention of whoever happens to walk by your rig in a room. So if that's what you're going for, obviously the Strimer Plus is definitely something to consider. It's not cheap by any means, and there is also an 8-pin that you can buy. You can buy packs of 2 possibly. So if you have a graphics card that uses, 8-pin or 6-pin power, then perhaps you could get one of those as well. It would look better than just throwing one of these in the system and calling it a day. If you could RGB all of your cables and maybe sync them up to a certain color, that would look nice. And that's one of the joys of RGB, is being able to select the color that you think looks best in your system. Cool. But the more I do that, the more I actually end up relying on just solid colors that are not LED backlit or illuminated, because I just think that those look cleaner in a system. I'd rather have white cables than a kit that just shines white. Jesus, I can't even find I don't even know what I'm doing. I can't even find the white color. One of these, it's a mess. whatever. I'm sure this is a really interesting product, and I know that other people gave this a really positive review, but I wanted to kind of shed some light onto the potential negatives associated with something like this. It's pretty expensive. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get looking just right. It's gonna clutter your system just a bit more. It's gonna make cable management just a bit more difficult. It's gonna be difficult to route behind the motherboard tray, especially in a mid-tower or even a micro ATX case. I would not attempt this in an ITX case unless it's one of those big ones like the Fantex Evolve ITX or the NZXT Manta, something like that. Well, that's kind of old school, but you know what I mean. This, yeah. I don't know how I feel about it. I guess I'm being critical because I feel like no one else is. And that for me is enough to make me want to kind of give you guys a different perspective on a product like this. Very cool, it's definitely innovative. I loved it at CES, but the more I got to play with it here in the studio, the more I realized it's not for me. And it potentially is not for you either. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you guys like this product, let me know. If you disagree with what I said, that's totally okay. We can have differing opinions. I think my opinions are justified, but you might not share the same experiences. Maybe you have a bigger case. Maybe you're willing to look past all the negatives to have something that looks freaking dope. And if you just want a solid color, I mean, let's say you have like a blue or a yellow themed build. There you go, you know, light blue, pink, white. This is actually what I ended up using in the S340 Elite temporarily you saw in the B-roll. I don't know what else to say. It's linked down below, you can check it out. It's not for me, but it could be for you. If you guys like this video, thumbs up, click the subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for being critical with me.